What's the purpose of business? Anybody? What's the purpose of business? To make money? 30 years of asking that question, and the first response has always been to make money. But that's, I guess, my first challenge for the morning. I'm going to suggest to you that the purpose of business is actually not to make money at all. But it is someone's purpose. So whose purpose is it to make money? Who of you own business in the room? Some of you would like a return on the capital you have invested and the time that you put into your respective businesses. So clearly the owners and the shareholders of a business, it's their purpose to make money. What's another stakeholder group that has the purpose of making money? I ask lots of questions, by the way, so it's going to be fairly interactive. Who else likes to get paid each week? Your staff. So your staff obviously turn up. They like to get a check in return for the hours that they put in. And generally there's a third broad stakeholder group that likes to get paid as well. Who is that? Your suppliers. So essentially, the purpose of making money is actually the owners and shareholders, the staff and suppliers. So I go back to my first question. What then is the purpose of business? Spot on. Spot on. And when you actually look at the research in this area, we go back to, say, Peter Drucker, died just a few years ago, arguably the most prolific management thinker in recent times, talked about the primary function of a business is to service the customer. Leo Burnett, the founder of Leo Burnett Advertising, one of the top 10 advertising companies on the planet. The sole purpose of business is service. And Seth Godin, many of you have heard in this room, probably certainly my number one marketing guru on the planet at this point in time, says the sole purpose of business is to serve the customer. So when you have the greats of the advertising, the marketing and the management world all in agreement that the purpose of business is serving the customer, I'm happy to go along with their wisdom. And when you think about it, as the gentleman over here said, you don't have customers, you don't have a business. Because in real simple terms, if you people didn't have customers, there would be zero reason for any of you to be sitting in this room right now. But sometimes we forget about the customer in our day-to-day busyness. That's B-U-S-Y-N-E-S-S. Sometimes customers are an interruption to our business, a pain in the butt. And sometimes people somewhat facetiously say, business would be great if you remove paper and people. But of course, it's the people side of things that actually makes our respective businesses great. So what then is the difference between customer service and customer experience? Because in my conversations with lots of people at different times, a lot of people use the two phrases interchangeably. They talk about customer service and they talk about customer experience as though they are one and the same thing. So the second question is, can somebody tell me what is the difference between customer service versus customer experience? Nice answer. It wasn't the one I was looking for. But anyway, give us the difference between the two. So customer service versus customer experience. Because they're actually quite different. That's partly, and we're going to delve down into the emotional side of it shortly. But the basic difference between service and experience. Fantastic. They're actually opposite ends of the spectrum. Customer service is what the business gives. Customer experience is what the customer receives. And many instances, there's a chasm as big as the Grand Canyon between the two. And the reason for that is that whilst you have total control over the service delivery, you do not have the same control over the experience that your customers are taking away. And the reason for that is because experience is all based on perceptions. For instance, who has a favourite restaurant? Not your own. Who has a favourite restaurant in this room? Anyone? Okay, so you can give them a plug. What's the name of the restaurant? Okay, so the Driftwood at Motherloo, what's their signature dish that you regularly order? Oh, okay. Has someone got a favourite restaurant with a favourite dish? Anyone? You're easily pleased in this room. It's broad people, you taste everything. So let's say, yes, sir. Okay, so the must wine bar, crab linguine. Excellent. So your first name is? William. So William goes into the must wine bar and sits down and orders his crab linguine. 5 minutes later, your name, ma'am? Amanda goes in 5 minutes later, sits down at the must wine bar and also orders crab linguine. So think about it. 2 dishes made in the same kitchen with the same ingredients by the same chef and staff at exactly the same time. Half an hour later, William goes out and says to the maitre d', once again, you guys have outshone yourselves. That crab linguine was absolutely superb. Best there is that I've ever tasted. And then 5 minutes later, Amanda walks out and says to, and of course the maitre d', somewhat expectantly standing there, goes, and ma'am, how was the crab linguine? And she goes, it was okay, but I've certainly tasted better. The question is, who's right, William or Amanda? They both are, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about customer experience, we're dealing with the perceptions of individual customers. So whilst you have control over the service that you provide, you have less control over the experience that your customers are taking away, because we're dealing with human beings who think, feel differently from one to the other, and we all have different expectations. But what I'm going to perhaps share with you this morning is some of the things that you can be doing, I guess, to take greater control over what it is that your customers experience. Having said that, when it comes to delivering service, what do you believe is the biggest barrier to the delivery of great service? What's the biggest barrier to the delivery of great service? It's not that deep. Not that deep, righty? Confidence? Maybe? It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but what I'm going to suggest to you, and this will take a little bit of thinking to take home, the number one barrier to the delivery of great service is the delivery of good service. As Voltaire said hundreds of years ago, the enemy of great is good. In fact, in his recent books, Good to Great, any of Jim Collins' books, he talks about the same concept. The barrier to greatness is goodness. And the reality of it is that most of the businesses in the hospitality sector are actually delivering pretty good service. But because you're delivering good service, you're not getting really that sort of in-the-moment feedback as to how you can improve your service. Because sort of everyone's sort of happy, but none of your customers are walking out of your respective businesses doing handstands, swinging from chandeliers, already Facebook messaging their friends as to how wonderful the service was, because all it really did was meet their expectations. And we'll talk about sameness later towards the end of my talk. So again, some of the things that we'll walk through is what are some of the things that we can be doing that shift the service that we're providing from the category of good, average, satisfactory, also ran, etc., into the stratospheres of fantastic, amazing, and great. Because ultimately, that's why the topic of my talk this morning is that customer experience is truly your number one competitive advantage, and we're going to work through some of the ways that you can be looking at that. See, because service is what you give. Experience is actually multisensory. Just like a surfer on a wave. It's about the feel of the board beneath their feet. It's obviously the temperature of the water. It's the air in their face. It's the sound of the surf. It's multisensory. So what we're going to do is spend a little bit of time in each of those 6 senses and looking at how you can take apart the service delivery and look at it from the viewpoint of your customer's 6 senses. Because ultimately, a great customer experience is simply a combination of everything that your customer sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches. And the biggie of them all, coming back to Bridie's comment, is how they emotionally connect with your product or service offerings. So we need to take apart what it is that we're doing and address it from those 6 different viewpoints. Now, one of the problems that has occurred in this whole customer service space for decades is that many of you are running your businesses from very much a management, economic, rational mindset. You know, your training was basically in accounting and management and stuff. And the problem is that in this area of customer service, it only ever appears on the P&L as a cost. It never appears on the other side as a return. So, of course, the accountants in the room could sort of go, well, hang on, there's no correlation between a cost called customer service training over here, and it doesn't show up as a return on the other side of the double entry bookkeeping equation. But in latter years, there's been a huge amount of work done to actually find the connection between the investment and the return. And some research that was done recently by Forrester Research and Watermark Consulting from the US, but to me it's a very simple way of demonstrating it. And that is, in America they have this chart called the Customer Experience Index, where businesses are rated based upon the feedback from customers, rating the experience that they get by doing business with those particular organisations. And what Forrester and Watermark did was they compared the top 10 traded companies on the CXI versus the bottom 10 companies on the CXI. And it was done for this period of time from 2007 to 2011, of course, over that GFC. And what it demonstrated was that the top 10 companies, in terms of their total accumulated returns over that 5-year period, those top 10 showed an increase in the total accumulated returns of plus 22.5%. Over the same period of time, the S&P basically flatlined. Not much different to the ASX. In fact, over that 5-year period, the total accumulated returns of all the companies on the S&P traded at minus 1.3%. But here's the kicker, as you can see. The bottom 10 companies that traded on the CXI that traded on the S&P, they underperformed by minus 46.3%. It's a very simple way of demonstrating the correlation between the experience that your customers are taking away versus the financial returns of your respective businesses. So one of my mantras to my many clients is the easiest way to increase the bottom line is to increase the service levels to your customer. It is that simple. In fact, I somewhat simplistically say is that your net profit is purely a scorecard of how well you're taking care of your customers. Now, I know there are some accountants in the room that might argue with that thing, but simplistically, I believe that's how simple it should be. You want to increase your profits, increase your service to your customers. So then let's have a look at so there's the evidence. Question in the room is, who here drives a car? Most people. So the car that we drive, sometimes we forget that that particular car, at some point in time, was just an idea in somebody's head. It then became an idea, it then became some scratchings on a piece of paper. It then went through probably a computer-aided design process, then through a mass production, some chain lines and production. The car spat out the end, it then got put on a ship, it came across the waters, it got unloaded at the dock, it got put on a transporter, it got delivered to the dealership. You go down to the dealership, hand over some cash, they give you the keys, you drive it home, and hey presto, there is your new bright and shiny car sitting in your driveway. Because I don't think there's too many in the room where suddenly your car just manifested itself out of the ether. So when it comes to the design and construction of a tangible product such as a car or a mobile phone or anything tangible, most of us don't have any problem in understanding the rigorous process that we've gone through, all the hundreds of steps along that customer journey in terms of the creation of the tangible good. And yet what smart companies are doing is they are applying exactly the same rigor to the design and the delivery of this intangible thing called service. So this today is giving just a touch of some of the tools some of the questions to be thinking about as to how we design that whole service delivery process. Because along that customer journey, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of touch points that occur at your place of business on any given day. The good news and the bad news is that every single one of those touch points has the capacity to make or break the customer connection. As an example, who in this room is just a little bit attached to having their name spelt correctly? Hands up. Yeah, generally it's around 30 or 40%. But the problem is you need to get it right every single time, because the customer approaching you doesn't have a sign on their tattoo that says, I'm one of the 30% that gets really pissed off if you don't spell my name correctly. So we have to make it right every time to every customer, and yet for 70% of them, they don't actually care. But of course, you don't know in advance as to which group they're sitting in. So let's have a look at this design process through the 6 senses. The first one is, what is it that our customers see? So that can cover a whole range of things. It can start with simply the colours that we use for our respective businesses. And you think, well, hang on, what colours got to do with it? I just leave that to my graphic design person. But the question is, are the colours that you are using congruent with your business, your message, your ethos, or whatever? And if you need some more research in this area, just get back to your respective offices tomorrow and just Google the meaning of colour. Last time I looked, there's about 500,000 websites that relate to the meaning of colour or the psychology of colour. I was recently doing a keynote for the National Directors Association, their annual conference. Yes, funeral directors do have national conferences. And it's interesting that in Western society, what's the colour that we generally associate with death? Black. And yet in the Middle Eastern, it's white. In Brazil, and I get these two mixed up, between Brazil and Korea. One of them's green, one of them's blue. I forget which way it goes. And yet, of course, in China, but it's not just China, it's actually specific parts of China where red is very much the predominant colour when it comes to the funeral and the passing of loved ones. So, of course, as a country in that particular business, as Australia continues to become more multicultural, it would be fatal for, pun intended, for funeral directors to be just simply choosing black as the predominant colour for a funeral when they're dealing with different ethnicities and cultural groups. So again, there's a lot of psychology that goes into just the simple choosing of your colours, which is the decor of your premises. It can be even the presentation of uniforms, which is the segue into the style and the colours of the uniforms that you have of your staff. I mean, clearly the armies of the world have known the power of uniforms for centuries. And McDonald's and Qantas and Virgin also don't spend millions of dollars on uniforms if there's not some upside commercial advantage in doing so. So that becomes a question. How much are you investing in your uniforms? Are they functional? Are they practical? What are the colours? What do they convey to your customers? What about signage? Signs. And of course, who are signs for? Well, who are they not for? They're not for the people in this room, because typically at your places of business, you know where things are. But sometimes it's important for us to take a step back, step into the shoes of our customers, and even just be a customer at your place. Can I find the things that I need access to just by following the signs? And in many instances, you can't. One, because the signs aren't there, and two, the font size is so small or they're not actually lit, so you actually can't read them. So it's thinking through just that component of your business in terms of the signage, which then also leads into the fonts. I mean, here's a little exercise. Everyone just take out your business card. Just take out your business card. And some of you are sitting there going, I've come to this conference and I haven't even bought my business card. Well, there's 0 out of 10 on the sales scale. So just take out your business card. And for those of you wearing glasses, take them off. And just hold your business card out at arm's length and ask yourself the question, can I clearly read my business card? And sadly, many of you will be saying, well, no, I can't. Why? Because the font size is too small. But the problem is you think it's okay because you know what's on there, but the person that you give it to can't actually read it. So therefore, your business card has failed the purpose test because the person you've given to it has no idea what's on it because they can't read it. So the same thing, and I'm sure this has happened to many of you because it certainly happened to me many of times. You sit down in a nice restaurant, the menu is presented, the lights are dimmed, and guess what? You can't read the menu because of the scrolly font type, or that it's so small, or the colours clash. So therefore, the menu itself, it's a wonderful piece of art, but it fails the test in terms of the capacity for your customer to read it. So what are the policies that you have in terms of the font size and the font style of the communication that you're sending out to your customers? You need to just take the time to choose these things. John Hughes, just down the road at the Motor Group, talks about encouraging his staff to scurry, to move with purpose. Because like it or not, your customers are watching how your staff move. You know, how quickly do they take the order? Do they go to the counter? How do they move from the table to the kitchens, etc.? So we need to encourage and train our staff on literally how to walk properly. Because we cannot no longer take these things for granted. The days of just employing people and asking them to breathe on a mirror and if it fogs they're employed, those days are over. And I know it's tough to find good staff, but unless we take the time to do it and to train it properly, then we are going to pay the price for doing so. The auditory. What do our customers hear? How do we choose the background music to our bars and our restaurants or whatever? And sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that the music is for the staff. Two close friends attended a cafe in the Cottesloe area a couple of years ago, ordered their coffee, sat down. A wait person came past and Michael said, "Do you mind turning the background music down, please? I can hardly hear my wife talk." "I'll check it out." Nothing happened for a couple of minutes. The lady walked past again. Michael said, "Have you done anything about the music?" She said, "Oh, I mentioned it to the manager, but he said that's the way that it is because that's the ambience of this restaurant." And Michael said, "Okay, fantastic." Said to Leslie, "Let's go." So they stood up and started walking out as the person was bringing their coffee to the table, which they'd already paid for. And they said, "Here's your coffee." He said, "Not interested, and we won't be back." If you cannot listen to your customers and care about the background music, we're not going to sit here because we can't do what we came here for, which is to have a conversation. So we have left. Now, I'm not going to share the name, but I can tell you that he's told that story dozens and dozens of times, and it continues to cost that business money because a lot of people don't go there because of the way they actually treated him on that particular occasion. And of course, it's made worse now because, TripAdvisor goes crazy when those sorts of incidents happen. And that was just simply because someone couldn't be bothered turning the volume of the background music down. So what are your customers listening to when they're put on hold? Or do we just leave that up to messages on hold? Or do we just simply plug into the local radio station? Running one of my workshops about 18 months ago down in Bunbury, and there was a gentleman in the audience and he stepped in and he said, "I've got to share this example with you." He said, "The other day I was on hold waiting for my travel agent. And listening to the local radio station, suddenly there was an ad for what? Another travel agent in town who he said I'd actually forgotten all about. He said, "You don't need two guesses as to who I actually did my booking with." Now, it doesn't come much dumber than that by just simply taking the lazy option, plugging in a radio station, music on hold, and it's costing you business. So we need to take the time to think these things through. What are the words that our customers are using? The Ritz-Carlton's coming to town shortly. In their training of their staff, they have this concept called language engineering. There are words that their staff are prohibited from using whilst on duty. Words like mate, pal, buddy. Getting rid of the negative sayings like no worries, no problems. I mean, I generally stay here at Crown quite often, generally every month. I'm back in the chair for the Professional Speakers Australia, stay here regularly. And it's amazing how the phrases, no worries, no problems, it's just part of our vernacular. And it annoys me every time I hear it. And being called mate by a pimply-faced kid at McDonald's drive-thru is not appropriate. But it's not the kid's fault because he hasn't been trained as to what are the appropriate language to be used in the conversations that we have with our customers. Because once again, you don't know if that next customer is a grumpy old bugger like me who gets a little bit annoyed when people are using some of these phrases. And hey, I'm happy to take it on the chin. Yes, I can be a bit precious at times, but then so are many of your customers as well. The olfactory. What does your business smell like? Who knows what a new car smells like? Guess what? There ain't no such thing. That's why different makes of cars smell different to others. Nothing is left to chance. Some of them, like Cadillac and these places, have their own patented fragrances that they build into the upholstery and carpentry of their cars to create that point of difference. So how do you choose the aerosols and the toiletries in your respective businesses? Is it just basically based on price or what seems to be fashionable? Or have you thought through the whole aromatherapy area where the smell is congruent with the colours and everything else, and it's also because there's as much research that goes into the olfactory side of business as there is. Singapore Airlines have their own patented perfume called Stefan Floridian Waters. It is the only perfume that the flight attendants are allowed to wear. It's the same fragrance that's in the hot towel you get on takeoff, and it's the same fragrance that's in the aerosol cans they use to spray the cabins in their limousines and taxis. It's no accident that Singapore Airlines continually rates in either the 1, 2, top 3 airlines in the world, because nothing is left to chance. So think about it. What does your business smell like? Now, why are you probably the wrong people to ask as to whether your business is fresh or musty? Why are you the wrong people? Because you're there every day and we actually become immune to the smells that are around us. People who smoke don't know that they stink. People who have dogs don't know that their house smells of dogs. So sometimes we have to get strangers to come in and ask these questions because we can't actually detect the difference. The gustatory. Once upon a time in my age, going back to the 60s, who were the rock and roll stars? Well, the rock and roll stars were the rock and roll stars. Who are the rock stars of today? The chefs. How many cooking programs are there on television today? Dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens. In fact, there are complete channels dedicated just to cooking programs. You know, so the Heston Blumenthals and the Gordon Ramsays and all these, they are the new superstars of modern society. People eat out more often. We are far more discerning. We're far more adventurous. But at the same time, we are far more picky about what's right and what's not right. 20 years ago, Nescafe Blend 43 was about as good as it got. Maybe 30 years. Whereas now, your customers are so particular about the way they want their coffee. None of it can be left to chance. So it's making sure that you train your people properly in how to use an espresso machine. Because as many of you in this room know, it's not the machine that makes the coffee, it's the fully trained barista that knows how to make a decent coffee using that same machine. Because you can have 2 coffees made by 2 people with the same beans, and one tastes great and the other one tastes crap. Got nothing to do with the beans, it's all about the skill of the barista. So do not leave the training of your staff to chance in terms of making coffees for your customers. The somatosensory. These are the messages that are communicated via touch. So what are the correct temperatures for our premises? Do we just leave it to chance, or do we actually taken the time to understand what is the best temperature? Now, when I'm running, say, half-day workshops with my clients, in a room like this, the room would be set at about 18 degrees. I would let people know it's going to be cold. You need to bring a jacket or a jumper. Because the research reveals that we learn better, we retain more information, we have gained better understanding when our brains are cold. And if you think about it, how easy is it for you to concentrate on a 38-degree Perth day when the air conditioning's gone bust and it's humid? You may as well go home because you're not going to get anything done. So again, what are the best temperature settings for our office environments, for our bars, our restaurants and everything else? And clearly it depends whether you're living in Albany or Perth or Broome makes a difference in terms of the ambient temperature of our premises. But what I'm saying is you cannot risk to leave it to chance. You need to do your homework and find out what is best for you. Those of you that have hospitality, have accommodation, what are the programs that you have in place to put plastic bags with CLR around the shower head to decalcify your shower heads every few months? Because how many of you ever stayed in a place and you've turned the shower on and all the jets have gone every which way except on you? Show of hands. Few people in here. So again, do not leave these things. So this comes back to your maintenance schedules of taking care, because the other thing too is in so many of these organisations, I say to people that like owners of motels and whatever, when was the last time you as the owner of this establishment actually slept in one of the beds that you're selling to the public? You have to be a regular customer at your place. So many of my clients, they have a schedule with their staff, and effectively every weekend or during the week there is someone on their staff staying in one of their rooms on a scheduled basis to experience what it is their customers are experiencing. Otherwise, how do you get to report that that light's not working and that's what's happening and so on and so forth? So all the messages that come from touch. And one just little thing. And I remember having this conversation with Neil many years ago. Do you have a hook behind the dunny door? How many times do we go into a loo, we want to take our jacket off, and the hook's either not there or it's missing? Just little things like this, because in the moment, then people, once they've been to the loo, they forget about it. But then it gets a little bit technical. Because some of you, I know, have realised used to have hooks on the door, but you removed the hooks because ladies in particular would use the hook to hang the handbag. And then you had, of course, those rat bags who would come over, reach over the door, grab the bag and steal the bag. So therefore, the easiest way to do that was to remove the hook. Without thinking, you could have shifted the hook from the door to the wall. So again, in the moment, is it going to make or break you $1 million? No, but for the experience for that particular customer in the moment was not a very pleasant experience. So it's this sort of attention to detail. The emotional. Hopefully they're not like this guy. But when you think about business, who knows you all know it. What's the catch cry of Toyota? Oh, what a feeling. That's pure 100% emotion. And the reality of it is that every one of you in this room are in the service industry, which means that 75% plus of all the buying decisions of your services are all emotionally based. McDonald's, loving it. Mitsubishi, love that car. Because what those advertisers understand is that people are making decisions primarily based on emotions, and then they go and justify it rationally or economically later on. As Maya Angelou said, and it's one of my favourite sayings, she said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So what are the processes that you have in place to both understand and then the way in which that you make your customers feel special? Because it's in them feeling special that's going to be the basis of the word of mouth that they take out and converse with the world. Because see, a lot of people get trapped into thinking that their brand is their logo and their tagline. Your brand is what people are saying about you when your back is turned. Your brand is the word on the street. And of course, who ultimately controls the word on the street? You guys do, because the word on the street is simply a reflection of everything that your customer has seen, heard, smelled, tasted, touched, and how they've emotionally connected with your product or service offering. So in closing, how do you create a point of difference? Because I believe that not just the hospitality and tourism sector, but most businesses are drowning in what's called a sea of sameness. I think it was the sales manager of Toyota years ago in a BRW article said, I think we're in trouble when not even I can tell the difference between a Toyota Camry, a Mazda 6 and a Honda Accord at 500 metres. Why? Because they're all the same. They come in the same colour options. They've got 4 wheels. They've got a steering wheel. They've 2 in the front, 3 in the back. Boot capacity is about the same. Engine capacity and performance is about the same. There is no difference in the product. And working with an accountancy firm just a few weeks ago, I said to them, your point of difference. If I was to go around your regional town and get flyers from all the other accountants, lay them out on your boardroom table, and then cut off all the titles and the letterheads, I could chop and change them, and there would be no way of you could differentiate between what one accounting firm is offering to the others because you're all using the same language, saying the same things. And I think it would be fairly true of the people in this room. We could take off the names, look at our list of services, what we provide, how good we are, and it's all the same. But there is something where you do have a unique point of difference to every other business in your industry. There is something that your business has that none of your competitors have. Who's that? Who is it? What's the point of difference? The people. Because the one thing that you've got, that the others haven't got, are the people who work for you. Because business today, whether you like it or not, is actually about relationships. People, as Mark McCormick, the founder of the International Marketing Group, said, people, when all things are equal, want to do business with their friends. And when things become unequal, they still prefer to do business with their friends. So we need to take the time to develop the relationships by understanding what do our customers want to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and how do they want to connect with us as human beings. And in summary, the beauty of it is we need to find our point of difference, but the good news is there are no losers in this space. Because when you really lift that service bar and provide those extraordinary experiences for your customers, first of all, your customers win because they get to experience a far greater experience. Your staff win because they get to deal with happy people, and therefore they're quite happy in their place of work. Management wins because you get less absenteeism, you get less churn, you generally get a higher caliber of people responding to your recruitment ads because of the reputation that you have in the marketplace. The shareholders, hopefully I've convinced you, they win because they get a better return on their investment. Your suppliers win because they're continuing to supply more products and services to your business and hopefully get paid quicker. And then the families of all the above win because you go home and give your kids a cuddle instead of giving the cat a kick. So there are no losers at any level when you raise the service bar. So in the final analysis, whilst product and price and all these other things, of course they're important in your business, there is nothing more than customer experience of being your number one indicator of success. And certainly, I believe in today's marketplace that customer experience truly is your number one competitive advantage. Thanks for listening.